Apologies to those who've been waiting. We're transitioning over from another meeting. We should be getting started shortly.
All right, good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to our work session, Wake County Public School System Board of Education. Want to welcome everyone on this beautiful, lovely afternoon. We apologize for running a little bit behind, but we just finished up a Budget and Finance Committee meeting that ran just slightly over. But I think everyone is here and ready to go as I look at my participant list. So at this point, I will turn it over to Superintendent Moore. Our first item on the agenda for today is our COVID Scientific Advisory Board presentation. So I'll turn it over to you, Superintendent Moore. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Chair Sutton and board members. I am pleased to bring you this afternoon a presentation from some folks that we are planning to partner with to help us with how we learn and understand what's happening with COVID in our community and schools, and how we can make good decisions for the reopening of schools. So I'm gonna stop right there. I talked about this a little bit at the last meeting. We have some guests with us today who are gonna help lead this work in our communities. And so I will turn it over now to Dr. Danny Benjamin from Duke University and his colleague, Dr. Kenesha Zimmerman, who will be guiding us through the presentation today.
Great, thank you to both of you. And Drs. Moore and Sutton, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So fundamentally, this is at the moment a program that is local and is sponsored by the National Institute of Health. It's designed to be a partnership with school districts. In the next month, we're going to be moving the program into a statewide phase. And the month after that, we'll be moving this into a national program. At its core, the program is one of a service partnership between major medical centers and universities and the community school districts. And the overarching goals of the program are to provide service to equip school leadership, folks at the superintendent level and at the office level and at the board level, to equip them with scientific knowledge around making the decisions that they need to make related to policy. It's designed to equip and educate teachers and staff throughout school districts on the latest science and how to interpret all that and what's going on in one's local community as it relates to transmission of infection related to the pandemic. My partner in this is Dr. Kenesha Zimmerman. She's an associate professor at Duke University. She and I are co-chairing this effort. Dr. Zimmerman's going to go ahead and provide context and background over the next several slides. Go ahead, next slide, please. And Dr. Zimmerman, if you could pick up, that'd be great.
Thanks, Dr. Benjamin. So we all know there have been more than 17 million COVID-19 cases and more than 650,000 deaths globally. We know in North Carolina, it's also affecting us with a number of cases quadrupling over the last several months. Initially, we thought children weren't really affected with less than 2% of cases, but more recently, we've learned they can not only get COVID-19, but they can also get severe disease, be hospitalized, and even some of them unfortunately die. Next slide, please. This has caused a significant problem on multiple accounts. Many people are suffering, and it's also caused difficulties in deciding when to go back to school and how to go back to school. But we know that school is really important. There's evidence of significant social, emotional, and educational burden, particularly for underrepresented students, when there's delay to go back to in-person school. In addition, school districts currently don't have access to a range of credible data and scientific evidence to inform important decisions regarding what school should actually look like when we return. Next slide, please. So one of the potential solutions is what we're calling a data-driven approach to your decision-making. We intend to initiate a direct-to-family and community-centered approach to provide scientific and data-driven evidence to help keep children, teachers, and the community healthy and safe during the pandemic. This data-driven feedback would be education, it would be review of the available action plans, it would be helping with pandemic mitigation efforts, and also working with the local health departments and the state health departments with regard to management of infectious clusters within the school setting. We intend for this to be a three-tiered approach through education, consultation, and targeted research. Next slide, please. So we're calling this, at least at the moment, the COVID Scientific Advisory Board. This would be analogous to hospital advisory teams or data safety monitoring boards and advisory boards to nonprofit organizations. This team would be multidisciplinary, would have expertise that could cover the gamut of children and adults, infectious diseases, critical care, pulmonary, aerosols, and what have you. They would have the expertise to look at the national, state, and local epidemiology and provide insight into current research, such as do children versus adolescents submit or transmit the disease more or less? The data has been quite confusing. We would potentially help monitor infection within a specific school system. And as Danny mentioned, we would start our efforts in North Carolina and then expand nationally. Next slide, please. So the first aim is really focused on education. We really think it's very, very important that people have the truth and access to information that can help guide decisions. This would be education for administrators, teachers, staff, and parents with access to real-time, data-driven information about COVID-19. We would be collecting, synthesizing, and interpreting that data to help you make your decisions. We hope to cultivate trust and facilitate delivery of culturally appropriate information in this support and making sure that we're communicating in terms that are interpretable by the public. Our goal, above all, is to lead with empathy and commitment to children's health. We anticipate that this educational component would take the form of webinars for parents, administrators, teachers, and staff, newsletters, as well as a website. Next slide, please. The next aim is school policy consultation. This would help you to facilitate informed decision-making. We would provide data-driven information so that you can actually make decisions about what to do and how to do it. We intend to collect person-level data from members of the school district, as well as data about rates of disease in the local, state, and national communities. And we would provide that information, distill it down to you, and provide that to you with the ability for you to interpret it with our help and then to make your own decisions. The deliverables there would be these dashboards that would allow you not only to look at your own data, but look at your data in comparison to other districts across the state and potentially other districts across the nation. This would allow you to have a customized assessment of your own district and how you should move forward. Next slide, please. And then finally, embedded within this effort is research, mostly because this is funded by the NIH. We intend to embed a couple of research questions such as, does the hybrid model versus the in-person model actually contribute to increased rates within the of COVID-19 within the community? We don't anticipate that this would require additional information from children or from their families, other than what would be collected to be able to give back to you. Next slide, please. So we think that this effort has significant benefit to child health and school districts. It helps to solve a problem that we believe is most immediate to child and family health. We believe that it gives us an opportunity to all engage, including families, teachers, and staff, all of us who are very affected by COVID-19. Again, we would create an educational series for teachers and administrators and for parents. We would help with some consultation through the advisory board. We would interpret local data and then be able to use your specific data and feed that back to you in combination with data from the county and data from the state and nation to help you make decisions about what to do next. Next slide, please. This is a potential structure. Again, we anticipate getting lots of data from multiple different sources, feeding that through this scientific advisory board with a wide range of experience, and then having conversation with the school board to help them make decisions. Next slide, please. So we have a broad range of experience on our team. We have actually other members who aren't represented here on this picture. This team has experience, as I mentioned, in infectious diseases with Dr. Akinboyo, Dr. Mickey Cohen-Wolkowitz, and Dr. Danny Benjamin, as well as primary care with Dr. Gabriela Mirdiaga Pangioti, and I'm a critical care physician. We also have extensive experience within NIH and in COVID-19 in particular. I'll turn it over to Danny to see if he has any additional comments.
No, great. Thanks, Kenesha. That's ideal. If there are any questions, certainly the two of us are willing to take them. And just as a warning, both of us, the team members have known each other on the order of 10 or 15 years. So you'll hear us slip back and forth between the formal and the informal. Fundamentally, both Kenesha and I are parents in the public school system. I have 4 teenage sons, and I know that you know, when I go off to work in the hospital and my sons are not in school, it's they're not living in a perfect bubble and at zero risk of COVID-19. And so the fundamental purpose of this is to help the school districts make decisions to address the key question: are children at greater risk in school? Are they greater risk out of school? And we'd love to be able to help you all with this. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Dr. Benjamin and Dr. Zimmerman. We certainly appreciate the information and the presentation and the invitation to join and partner with us. It could not be certainly more timely. I think all the board, I think I can speak safely for the board to say that we were all thrilled to hear about this opportunity 2 weeks ago when Superintendent Moore brought it to us. And so we certainly welcome the expertise and information and knowledge and research potential that this brings to us. So thank you for that. I will open it up for questions. I saw Dr. Martin's hand first, and then I'll go in the order of Dr. Martin, Ms. Kushner, Mrs. Cash, Mr. Hegarty, and then Mrs. Scott. Keep in mind, we've got a couple of agenda items. We're running just a little bit behind, so I want to make up some time. So please try to keep your questions as brief as possible. Dr. Martin.
Thank you. And as Mr. Chair Sutton said, absolutely excited to see this partnership go forward. I think you all will bring a lot of value to our work. You know, as a professor at NC State, I have to just give a little bit of the only challenge is your due, but we'll forget that one. Anyhow, no, glad to be in partnership. Just one quick point and then a quick question, particularly for the public. You know, as a fellow scientist, I want to just reemphasize that as scientists, we observe and often gain more questions than we necessarily get answers. And so what I really appreciate is that you all will help bring the data together and put it in context. But I just want to reinforce from a public perspective that the data is not going to say, based on the data, do X, Y, or Z. It's based on the data. We still have to make the best decisions that we can. So just to reemphasize that. My question is, looking at your team, and you've got a lot of broad-based expertise. My one question that I didn't see is statisticians on the team. it strikes me that particularly given the nature of this work, dealing with statistics and taking population data to digest it into what's relevant would be useful. So can you tell me a little bit about the statistics basis of your team?
Sure. So just to reemphasize point number one, we actually don't tell school districts to open or close. What we do is we tell school districts, this is the science around masking. This is the science around transmission rates. We're not experts over whether or not schools should be open or closed. That's fundamentally a question for people who are expert in education, K through 12, of which we are decidedly not. 3 of the team members have PhD level training in either epidemiology, and clinical pharmacology. And then we have master's level training in statistics and PhD partners as it relates to statistics.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Mrs. Kushner.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Benjamin and Zimmerman and Dr. Zimmerman for coming today. And God bless the NIH for giving this grant to y'all. I truly appreciate the emphasis on empathy and commitment to children's health, because it's not just their risk to COVID, it's their risk of being out of school, their risk to being in the community where we have a virus that may not be under control. So thank you for that. And given the novelty of this virus and all the uncertainty and information and disinformation that's been around it, how do you all, what will be the frequency of the webinars, and how will you all be pushing the webinars out? Will that be the school district's role to make sure our parents and families are tuning in? And how will you update the webinars?
Kanisha, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So our intention is initially to push out the webinars on a weekly basis, primarily for teachers, but then it would be available kind of post-doc to the public. After a couple of those weekly seminars or weekly webinars, we'd really like to get some feedback as to whether or not people think it's useful to continue at that frequency. And we intend for this to be an ongoing collaboration so that you guys can tell us how helpful it is and what else you need.
Thank you, and thank you for being here today.
Sorry, I lost connection briefly there. Don't remember exactly who was next. I think, was that you, Mr. Haggerty?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Again, I want to thank you all for coming and presenting to us today. We're very excited about this project, and I think we have a lot of hope in the promise of your research. I had a question about the presentation, and several times you referred to the monitoring infection numbers in the schools, collecting, synthesizing, and interpreting data. And I was curious what form that data would take. I know we'll be doing temperature screenings, but I didn't know if you saw any role for school-based testing, if this would be, I saw a reference to questionnaires. I didn't know if there would be contact tracing. Could you give us a little more information about some of the data that you'll collect and track?
Yes, so let me put those into 3 buckets. Okay. Bucket number 1 would be the purview of the state health department and the state infrastructures that are already in place. That bucket belongs to the state of North Carolina. So that has to do with contact tracing and the great responsibilities that the health departments are under at the moment. We don't want to tread into that. That's not our purview. They're people who are better equipped, better trained, and have the infrastructure to do that. We have no business being in that arena. But however, those results are publicly available, and those can be brought into centrally and then packaged and pushed back out to school boards and to school districts and say, this is when you have a little bit of variance between 7% and 5% positivity, and that's lasted for 3 days, what's the difference between that and say seeing that difference over a 3-week period, for example? How exciting might that be? Okay. Bucket number 2 is going to be testing, which is not the purview of this grant. Those tests are really in the healthcare provider, the relationship between family and healthcare provider, or family and going down to get those tests wherever they might get them. The kind of information or the kind of data that we would be collecting for the purposes of the questions at hand for the school board and for the school leadership, those will be done in partnership with superintendents. And so what we're developing an iterative process for that. We're actually meeting with a subset of superintendents. Ms. Moore joined that team. Excuse me for struggling with coughing here. That's Diet Mountain Dew, not viral symptoms. Ms. Moore joined that team, and that team has been meeting on Wednesday nights. And it's there that we're working with the superintendents to say, okay, what data are you collecting anyway, and how do we make that as easy as possible so that A, it's not a burden for the families, or at least minimal burden on the families. B, it's as useful to you as possible. And C, it's linked so that you can see at the school level or at the classroom level, gosh, do we have a school or a group of children or a group of teachers that need maybe a little bit more support, which is not currently available in the publicly available data.
Okay, that helps clarify that a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hegarty. Mrs. Cash, actually you were next, so I apologize for that. Skipped over you, so coming back to you.
I'm good. Unlike Dr. Martin, I say that retirement benefits come from Duke since I worked with hospitals. So here did one of my questions that I wanted about the links to the webinars. I feel like at the board, we are like really being faced with these questions. So I don't really have a question, but I appreciate the fact that we are now going to be working with you. I think that's going to be really critical for this board. So as long as we know that there are links to whatever you guys are doing, I think we're going to have a lot of options. Thank you for that.
Great. Thank you for saying that. And as I was fumbling a little bit my previous answer, Kenesha Zimmerman, who often does this, texted me and reminded me that we do have, and we are exploring downstream testing. However, it's not within the current scope of work. And so she gently reminded me with the text that that I shouldn't forget to bring that up. And thank you for working at Duke and for making our work possible.
Thank you.
I appreciate that addendum to the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cash. Mrs. Scott.
Thank you. My questions have actually been answered, so thank you.
Okay. Just a couple of questions. Will you all need to come before the board in additional meetings going forward, or will that information be brought forward by Superintendent Moore? How often do you foresee needing to come before this board?
Typically, these tend to work best if we, on our side, have a primary point of contact, and on your side, you all have a primary point of contact. That gives the most stability to the relationship. Right now, we're working through 40 some odd MOUs with about 40 to 50 different school districts in North Carolina, and then some outside of the state of North Carolina. Those MOUs, they'll need those sorts of things you all will need to deal with as you see fit. The primary communication will be with a single point of contact typically, and then a single point of contact for on your side. And that helps a lot with people really keeping clear in their mind the very, very limited role that we have in the context of the much larger decisions that you all have to make. And it helps you all, tends to help you all manage us a lot more smoothly.
Sure. Okay. And you mentioned, obviously, there are the 3 districts that are on your first slide, Chapel Hill, Carrboro, Durham, and Orange County, that are here in this area. You mentioned some 40 other districts that you work with across the state. How long have you been working with these other districts? And more importantly, what have you learned early on in establishing those relationships that might help us going forward as we get started at this point?
Okay, this has gone from, and I don't want to overrepresent what we've done, but this has gone from concept to funding to action plan in 3.5 weeks. So the team has been scrambling to put this together. We have just started locally. The 4th MOU most likely is going to be, we hope, is going to be with Wake County. Once we get the 4 local school districts really cohesive and gelled and things are running smoothly, then we will expand out. We are doing that in parallel to signing MOUs with the 32 or 36 other school districts right now that we have on tap. That process of adding those school districts on will be something that we'll do once we get this program up and running with the 4 school districts here that are local to Duke and to UNC.
Okay. Thank you for that. And Superintendent Moore, I know we've got a draft MOU coming, so can you talk about that, I guess, in next steps?
Sure. So we've been reviewing the MOU for a little bit over a week now, or right at a week now. I think I got it last Tuesday. And it's gone back and forth between attorneys and risk management and others. We are fortunate that the attorney from Tharrington Smith, Patricia Robinson, who's been helping with us, was actually involved in developing the initial MOU because Tharrington Smith also works with one of our partner districts that's already engaged in this a little bit sooner than us. So we were able to complete and work through that MOU as of this morning. I do hope to walk it onto the board for an action item this evening. And while it does not require board approval, I do think it's important that we publicly sort of put together this partnership and agree to it. So hopefully I'll be able to do that this evening.
And I support board approval of it. This is Jonathan. I do think it's great that this is going to the board.
Thank you, sir. All right, so Dr. Zimmerman, Dr. Benjamin, anything else?
Thank you for having us.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having us.
All right. Thank you again for being with us and agreeing to be a part of this meeting, and hearing from you all directly is greatly appreciated. And we look forward to possible approval of this later on in our meeting, and look forward to working with you all in the very near future.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on our agenda is the update on reopening school plans 2020-2021. Superintendent Moore, we'll let you continue to drive.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. As a part of our ongoing work with reopening schools, we're bringing today a little bit more information about a couple of the things that are really in process right now. In particular, we're going to bring you an update on technology distribution and how that work is going, as that is a big part of our first couple of weeks of instruction. And then there were a number of questions at the last work session around human resources topics, in particular with how this was impacting our staff, what our staffing looked like for the beginning of the school year. And so Dr. Matillo from Human Resources will also be bringing some additional information based on those questions that were asked at the last work session. I'll turn it over now to, I'm not sure if Lloyd is doing an introduction or if we're going straight to Marlo.
I am Superintendent Moore. Thank you, Chair Sutton, Superintendent Moore, and members of our board. Thank you again for this opportunity to provide an update of where we are with regard to the reopening. First, as we begin this presentation, we'd like to congratulate our principals and assistant principals, our teachers and staff, as well as our central services staff on the reopening of our schools. With yesterday as the first day of school for our traditional calendars, all of our schools are now open and our school year is well underway. During these last few weeks of our summer months since the closure of our last school year, our school-based administrators, teachers and staff, and central services personnel have worked tirelessly for countless hours to address the many components tied to reopening. Among these individuals is a core planning team and multiple steering committees that branch off the core team. I'd like to take this moment on behalf of our district to express our deep gratitude to all of our staff members across our schools and across our district for the leadership and unwavering support that's being provided to our students, our families, and to each other. Despite the complexities with all the twists and turns we've experienced, our school and district staff members have been determined to rise above each challenge with courage, conviction, and endless energy to give our students the very best we can. No doubt we look forward to incredible accomplishments our students will achieve during this new school year. As Superintendent Moore has indicated, this presentation focuses primarily on two key areas: our technology device distribution and our staffing tied to reopening. Chief Technology Officer Marlo Gaddis will present information about the technology devices, and Assistant Superintendent Dr. AJ Matillo will share information about our staffing. Our presentation will probably be about 30 minutes, if that, and once they both have had the opportunity to share information with you, we will provide a time at the very end to open it up for questions that you may ask for additional information or for further clarification. Again, thank you for this opportunity and thank you for your continued support as we have experienced the opening of our new school year. Marlo?
Thank you, Dr. Gardner. Good afternoon, Chair.
Marlo, I forgot to go over the desired outcome. So let me go through that very quickly. And if you would allow me, and you will speak to providing updates on student device and connectivity needs. We'll also provide information on the device distribution process that we're currently using to give devices to our families. Ms. Gaddis will also provide information on technology support options for our family. Once she completes her segment of the presentation, Dr. Matillo will begin to share updating on staffing and hiring for our new school year. He will give you information on the accommodation and job modification request. He will also provide some information on utilizing substitutes. And last, he'll give you some information on how we are supporting employees impacted by the delay in our students returning to school building. Ms. Gaddis, thank you for allowing me to do that, and I'll turn it over to you now.
No worries, Dr. Gardner. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Sutton and board members. It's my pleasure to share with you today some of the work being done in technology services in order to support our families with online learning. As we transition from spring to summer and now the reopening of schools, I'd like to share with you some of the lessons we've learned and how we've shifted our work to provide better support. The first lesson learned I'd like to talk about is about understanding the needs of our students. In the spring, as COVID-19 began, we asked schools to help us understand student technology needs at home. We asked families to contact their school or schools if they needed a device or a hotspot in order to learn. Loaned out students approximately 31,000 Chromebooks and approximately 5,000 hotspots. During the summer, we asked our schools not to collect those devices, except for our seniors who were graduating and our students who transferred out of district. Most or all of those devices are still in the hands of our students now. However, could not at that time, in all honesty, know that at that time, all student needs were being met. So this summer, we asked a little bit differently. Parents enrolling their students in Virtual Academy were asked to let us know if they needed a device. After that, Technology Services then asked our parents to complete a brief survey online, letting us know which situation best explained the student's need
for each of their students. That included if they already had or will need a device or hotspot, if they already had a district device or hotspot, or if they still have a need for one or both. Once the survey closed, we began to have a clear picture of what was needed. Interestingly enough, in talking with some of our parents, we learned that although they may have had a device at home in the spring, there was one family device that both parents and students were using and sharing in order to do the work for both parents' work and students' schooling. So the need for access has also become greater as we've talked about grading and attendance, which I know we're going to be talking about a little bit later today, and plans for a better and different learning environment for the fall. Our schools are now following up with all of our students for which we have no data currently on. Right. So in the spring, I'm going to go back again to May and March through May, excuse me. We began to provide devices from schools out of the existing inventory. We transported approximately 15,000 Chromebooks between schools, from this school to that school and vice versa, in order to distribute those devices to students. We also provided a guide to Chromebook distribution that was created in collaboration with health services that gave specific directions and best practices on how to run a safe device distribution in an effective and efficient way. Having the schools distribute devices caused some parents to have to pick up their students' devices at multiple schools. This time, we purchased an additional 50,000 Chromebooks, thinking that we would either need to use those or we would need to use those to replace the devices checked out as we continued. Over the summer, the tech services team worked with our schools to clean up our inventory system and clarify some of the data. We also worked multiple scenarios for the use and distribution of technology that would be dependent upon plan A, B, and C. Each plan requires very different distribution options. Once Wake County made the decision on the reopening plan, our team began developing the processes and finalizing those processes for the district rather than a school distribution plan. And finally, we spent the first weeks of August finalizing the processes in collaboration with a lot of teams. And I have to have a big shout out to our health services team, our HR team, transportation, and most of all, Activate Good. All were who were vital to the spring plan. But a big thank you to Activate Good, because without them, our device distributions would have been impossible. We would not have had enough staff to man those. So let me give you a few numbers. As of yesterday, we had 45,282 Chromebooks requested, 13,738 hotspots requested, and we had received responses from approximately 130,237 students. Now, I will tell you that those numbers have gone up since even yesterday. So we're approximately we're in the 46,000 and the 14,000 ranges right now. From the logistics of how the distribution is working, we're running 5 different sites, so Leesville Road, Enlow, South Gardner, Knightdale, and I'm losing one, Apex High School. We have 13 different shifts. We work in 4-hour shifts. There's 13 shifts. We have approximately 234 volunteers or staff are needed per week per site, which means just to run this, we need 1,170 volunteers and staff, which also equates to about 49 hours a week where we're providing time for families to pick up their devices. In case you wanted to know, these are just some of those numbers, and I just wanted to make sure you had those. All right, so yesterday we began the device distribution. Because there's no way for us to have 45,000 students all show up to pick up their devices at the same time, we made the decision to invite families to pick up their devices when they're ready. They can pick up at any of the locations, doesn't matter which location. They can pick up on the date or after to pick up their devices. Families can also pick up for all of their students. So if they get a notification from one of their students, they can then pick them up for all of their students. It's important to know that the families will receive an email or text with their date and logistics for the distribution. It will come from Technology Services, not the schools. And it's really important families read the message carefully. Once at the site, all staff, families, and volunteers go through the daily health screening. I have a huge shout out to our transportation department. Our bus drivers have been helping us with the health screenings for this. So as they come through, all of our bus drivers are working very hard to make sure that everybody coming in is healthy and safe before we get around each other. After the families are screened, they go through a verification process to confirm their request and their notification. Staff then provide a technology loan agreement that's to be signed, and then they go to the distribution centers next. For families that have questions, once they receive the device, they then can go to the help desk area to get some help with them, and then that's done. All in all, the process takes about 10 minutes start to finish, which has been a great opportunity. Finally, I would like to share the guides to technology site for students and parents. We heard loud and clear that our families need a clear instruction in one location. On the site, the family will find, you'll see number 1, under getting started, you'll see device information. You'll find out information about how to log in or how to reset your password. How to get into your email. And for parents, how you access the PowerSchool portal for parents. Under number 2, digital resources, there are step-by-step directions and videos in English and in Spanish for Canvas, Google Classroom, and several other resources, including Google Meet. Number 3, I'm jumping around a little bit, you'll see is the way you can contact the help desk. Any family who's having any issue with their technology is more than welcome, and we actually invite you and would prefer you actually contact us either through the number or through the online form to get help. And that has been a very busy help desk in the last couple of days. And again, a big thank you to transportation. We borrowed some of their folks to help us man the lines. Number 4 is where you can get parent help and online safety tips. And just as a note to self, we have also been working with Kids Before Screens, an organization I know that many of you have talked with about some of the things they would also like to see on this area, and have gotten some great suggestions. Number 5 is where we can get online safety for students. There are videos and other resources there for our students. 6, if Spanish and English is not your language, you can click the translate button and it will translate in other languages. And then number 7, way down at the bottom, it's a little harder to find, but this is so important. And that is, if you come to the site, if any parent or student comes to the site and they think, man, I really wanted this particular resource, I needed to know how to do this. Click on the link there and tell us what you need. And we have staff that are creating things as, ongoing, creating those information pieces. And we've been working with a lot of great world languages teachers, as well as Maria Rosa in the equity office and other departments on the translation for both video and the written interpretation. So we've got lots of different resources here for parents. I hope they use them. And I would love feedback as we go through this process. So parents are welcome to let us know, and students are welcome to let us know what they need. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Matillo.
Thank you, Marla, and good afternoon, Chair Sutton, Superintendent Moore, and board members. Happy to be here today to provide you an update regarding staffing for the 2020-21 school year, which we can now just simply say this school year, with schools beginning this week. When school buildings closed in March of this year, we were at the beginning of our busy season for recruitment and hiring. After many of our recruitment events at colleges and universities and our large district-sponsored job fair scheduled in April were all canceled, we shifted the ways in which we support our schools in filling vacancies. So we began recruiting through virtual fairs, job portals, webinars, and we developed new processes requesting personnel files electronically, and all interviews were conducted online. Thanks to this work, we have been able to hire or rehire 1,288 teachers for this new school year. As a reminder, rehires are candidates who we have reemployed after a break in service or who were on contracts that terminated last year and we rehired. So the district is beginning the year with a team of 10,700 teachers and 19,900 total employees. And the hiring continues still. HR continues to process candidates daily, so these numbers will continue to change and increase as we move throughout the next few weeks. We are beginning the year in good shape in terms of staffing. 99% of our teaching positions are filled. As the HR guy, this is a great stat to communicate, but I'm always tempered in that because as a principal knows, if I have one opening in my school, that can present a challenge. So we do continue to work with schools to ensure that we get as close to 100% as we can. When finalizing this presentation late last week, we had 125 teaching vacancies. Updated data as of this morning has us down to 108, and it's likely that that number has decreased even throughout today. So in addition to vacancy numbers, we've also been closely monitoring resignation and retirement data as compared to previous years. So from January to August of this year, we have seen 2,732 resignations. This represents an increase of 35 resignations from the same time period last year. 309 of those were retirements, and that represents a decrease of 19 from the same time last year. For a district with nearly 20,000 employees, these numbers reflect actually little change in the numbers of resignation and retirements that we've seen in previous years. So we do feel that overall we are in good shape with our staffing. Just as we shifted the recruiting process, we also made adjustments in how we onboard new employees. In fact, 894 employees have moved through an entirely new orientation process since March. And actually since finalizing this presentation, we've had an additional 49 employees complete this orientation for a total of 943. This new process consists of online training offered through a secure portal and socially distanced in-person sessions during which new hires receive their ID badges and laptops. Participants in these in-person sessions also have the opportunity to ask our HR team members questions and get support with their new devices. Feedback about this new orientation structure for those who have gone through it has been positive, and we are pleased with the flexibility and support it's provided new hires during this time. Also appreciate Marlo and her team for their collaboration, not only to provide devices at orientation, but also to help us provide access to the programs and applications teachers need to facilitate a smooth transition. And I think we did a better job than this in previous years, and this has really helped. The process in which employees are reporting to school buildings and work sites to start the school year has also changed. During the last work session, Drew Cook shared updates about our phase-in plans for employees returning to work. As a review, schools are beginning their phase-in plans for staff this week, and central services employees are also reporting to work sites. As a part of the phase-in plans, principals and supervisors are putting structures in place to support their employees in feeling comfortable returning to their work sites. During this time, employees can gradually adjust to the new health screening protocols. Also during this time, employees will report to work in small groups or on a staggered or rotating schedule to reduce the amount of people in one workspace at one time. During the phase-in period, if there are employees who are not comfortable reporting to work, they should be permitted to telework as long as their job responsibilities can be completed remotely. Supervisors may still ask employees to report during the phase-in period to complete tasks that must be done on site. School and central services phase-in plans are scheduled to end in mid to late October. At that time, all employees will be expected to return to their work sites unless they have approval from HR to telework. And employees who do not have approval from HR who are still uncomfortable returning to work may have some available leave to them. As I mentioned, we know that there will be employees who will not be able to return to a work site at the end of the phase-in period due to health conditions that place them at risk of severe illness from COVID-19. We developed the COVID-19 temporary accommodation request process to support employees who meet these conditions as outlined by the CDC. To date, we've received 1,402 temporary accommodation requests from school-based staff. Among these requests, 816 employees have been approved to telework. 225 of these employees were approved for another type of accommodation, which could include a rearrangement of the workspace, alternate on-site work location, modified work schedule, or enhanced PPE. It's important to note that this is an interactive process among human resources team members, the employee, and his or her supervisor. So nearly 300 of these requests are still in this phase of the process. We have 700 remaining accommodation requests to review at this time. These requests are mostly from central services employees or requests from school-based employees that were submitted after the deadline in July. Our goal is to have these requests processed and completed by the end of August. We will continue to accept accommodation requests, but we have communicated to employees that the late submission may impact our ability to grant the requested accommodation. This, of course, would not apply to an employee who submits a request based on a later revealed condition. We also have received many concerns from employees who do not self-identify as high risk, but they live with or care for individuals who are at high risk. That is why we developed the temporary job modification request process. While we are making every possible effort to support employees who've submitted a job modification request, we have to approve these requests secondary to the accommodation request from employees who self-identify as high risk for severe illness. As we review job modification requests, we also must take into account the needs of the school district and students. This means that teleworking may not be possible job modification for every employee who submits this type of request. Instead, we may need to look more at alternate on-site work locations or other job modifications. So far, we have received 673 job modification requests, and our goal is to process and complete these requests by the end of September. Additionally, during this phase-in period, principals and supervisors are working with employees without accommodations or modifications who are uncomfortable reporting to schools and other work sites. In some cases, they are able to provide support that helps employees feel more comfortable reporting to work. And in some cases, they are approving telework requests when the employee's job responsibilities can be performed at home. As with any school year, substitutes will play an important role in our schools. In a regular year, subs are there to cover instruction when teachers must be away from the classroom due to appointments, illness, childcare needs, and many other reasons. Teachers will no doubt continue to have these needs, but we also know that this school year will look very different for teachers and students. That is why we are putting a plan in place to ensure our substitutes are well prepared to support teachers and students in this new environment. Right now, we are finalizing a survey for our 2,800 subs that will ask them to share if they will be available to support online instruction, in-person instruction, or both. And we've received many responses from this survey already. In addition, we will provide guidance to principals to outline new expectations and processes for substitutes. For example, we will clarify for principals that substitutes will be expected to report to the school building to cover remote instruction. This requirement will ensure that the sub has access to technology resources, applications, and support needed to successfully deliver online instruction. We're also providing our substitutes new training components that will support them as they adjust to the new school environment. First, subs will complete the health guidelines training modules that address topics such as wearing gloves, taking temperatures, and healthy hygiene. This training will ensure that a sub working in a school for any period of time will be prepared to follow health protocols. Subs also will be utilizing technology more than ever before. That is why we are providing them the same courses our teachers will complete that focus on building their skills and delivering effective blended and online instruction. We will continue to look for additional ways to support and better utilize our subs as they work to support our teachers and students. We know there are some groups of employees who are directly and significantly impacted by the delay in students returning to our school campuses this year. Many of these are child nutrition and transportation employees. In a regular year, our district could not operate without the hardworking employees in these critical roles who feed and transport our students every school day. In fact, even when our school buildings were closed, these employees continued to answer the call as they supported food and device distribution efforts to make sure our families had the resources they needed throughout the end of the last school year and into the summer. We continue to utilize some of these employees as we ramp up our food and device distribution efforts again for the 2021 school year. For those employees in these departments who are not supporting these efforts, we are identifying alternative work opportunities to ensure their job stability while the school district remains in remote learning. Details about these opportunities will be provided to these employees this week. We know that the school year will look different for everyone, and because of this, our employees are experiencing a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. We continue to look for ways to support employees however we can. For example, we recognize that due to state calendar requirements, our traditional and modified calendar teachers may not have had the number of teacher workdays they needed prior to the start of this year. In response, we were able to create the teacher workday exchange leave process in which teachers could choose to work days prior to their designated work days and earn special leave that they can use later in the year. We also launched the component or helped launch the component of the FAST program to provide supervision for children of employees. Many schools are launching FAST programs this week, and all programs should be in place by August 24th. Assignments for children of central services employees to FAST programs are also underway. And finally, we are working to ensure that all employees have access to the latest information related to work and leave processes, as well as health guidelines and many other topics that are important to them. Information from Human Resources is included in the daily email updates sent to all employees. This information is also posted on the work and leave page of the Return to the Work site on Wake Connect. Questions and comments submitted by employees are reviewed, and FAQs on this site are updated regularly. Employees are the district's most valuable resource. We know this, and we are committed to listening to them, supporting them, and doing everything possible to ensure they have a successful school year. I know that was a lot of information. Marlo and I are happy to take your questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Gaddis and Dr. Matillo. Appreciate that information, and it was quite a bit. So we will get right into questions. I saw Ms. Mahaffey's hand up first, so we'll start with you, Ms. Mahaffey.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. My question was for Ms. Gaddis on, I believe it was slide 7 or 8, just noting the test site key, an explanation of what parents can find if they have to go to that site. I think if we can find a way to push that out for families, I think that would be really helpful, just so they know what's there, how to find it as they move through these times. I know PowerSchool and Canvas being down for a bit yesterday probably added. I also wanted to share that I had to call the tech support hotline and had quick service, and it was easy and painless. So thank you.
You're very welcome. And just to be clear too, I know PowerSchool, we did have some issues with that with the state. Our Canvas instance, the same as the states. And so we actually were not done with Canvas yesterday. So it worked out great for us, but I know a lot of our neighboring districts did have some issues.
Okay. And then, thank you. And then Dr. Matillo, the limited number of spots for telework, is that just because we only have we need a certain amount of employees in the building when students come back?
Yes, and it's not so much a limited number of spots for telework, but we just need to make sure, one, that the employee's responsibilities can be performed teleworking, and additionally, that the needs of the students can be taken care of, especially when they do report back.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Dr. Martin.
Thank you. One quick question, and the second one maybe a little more involved. The first question is, I appreciate the structure with the teacher workday exchange. I think because a lot of teachers did do a lot of work early over the summer. My question on that is, what are the restrictions on using those leave days? I think that normally there are restrictions that leave can only be used on non-instructional days or something to that effect. So can you clarify the guidelines of taking those leave exchange days?
Yes, sir. Yes, they function like annual leave days do. So for a teacher, it would have to be used on a work day in the future or other non-instructional days. You know, we know that oftentimes inclement weather days are moved to teacher work days, so then it would be applicable during those times as well.
So this year, given the calendar, we have a very limited number of those. So I guess my question is, is there, it's a great offer, but does the calendar have enough of these instructional days so that this is actually a real benefit and not just, you can have these leave days, but there's no days you can actually take?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. It's one of the reasons why we tried to limit the number that they could earn at the front end, knowing that we needed to monitor how they could use them at the back end. You know, days like a teacher workday headed into spring break or headed into an extended winter vacation. Those are times that maybe teachers would prefer to take a leave day than report to work and kind of extend that. So I think in looking at most of the calendars, there were days that we were able to identify that would be good opportunities for teachers to take them. And again, not that I'm wishing inclement weather, we've had enough to worry about this year, but if those days arise, those would be additional opportunities.
Okay, so again, as I recognize that, appreciate the effort. I still would like us to, I wish there were a way that we could actually compensate teachers for the work they did over the summer. My second question, and this relates a little bit to Ms. Mahaffey's question. So, you know, on slide 12, we have a pretty broad statement that, you know, basically says that if a teacher can work from home and they don't feel like it's safe to come in, then the request for telework should be improved. And that's why I was a little surprised at the numbers to see that really only about 58% of the requests appear to have been approved for telework. I have had some staff raise the concern that, you know, restrictions have, it's been fairly restricted as to define what can be done or what can't be done from home. And so I guess my question is, what are the primary issues for the disconnect? Because given our statement on page 12, a 58% approval rate seems a little bit low.
Yeah, so to address your question, and you can ask some follow-ups if I'm not addressing it completely. You know, one of the things we did look at was the number of student requests for virtual academy. So, you know, principals had to know if I had X number of students who would be reporting to the school building, we couldn't have too many that were teleworking because we wouldn't have enough needs to support that. Some of the requests we still have not yet gotten to, so, you know, more might be approved. And also during this time of the transition throughout the first quarter, even if you don't have the approved teleworking accommodation request from HR, additional employees are working with their supervisors, principals, to be able to telework at this time.
So you're seeing this approval for telework to be, is it semester long or year long? I mean, it strikes me that we need some kind of a, you know, time window on the approvals. I hear that some of that is, you know, direct with supervisors, but, you know, I guess right now, while everybody's remote, it strikes me that we should be a little bit more liberal in the telework option, but that might change come, you know, end of first quarter or something. So is this approval for like semester long, or is it, what's the staging for that approval?
Yeah, so great questions. You know, we are, again, being very, very liberal and flexible and trying to accommodate staff's needs, especially at the point at which, you know, students are home learning virtual for the first quarter. The ones that we've approved, we've tried not to box ourselves into a complete date, but we have let employees know we are thinking it's sort of like a first semester kind of approval, and we will reevaluate as we know what conditions look like. But we're trying to keep it flexible. Certainly we will give employees lots of notice before having to end those accommodations. You know, if conditions change and the pandemic's gone and more students report back to school, that's one thing. If students continue to stay remote, then that's another condition. So we want to leave ourselves a little bit of flexibility, but also let the employees know ahead of time if we're going to have to adjust.
So I guess the other part of my question I didn't quite hear the answer to is, what are the primary reasons for non-approval?
I think student needs with the virtual academy, as well as the employee's job responsibilities. Those are the two main factors we look at.
And I guess job responsibilities like what are we saying can't be done remotely?
So for example, if I am, a bus driver when schools are in session, that's a really difficult job to do remotely.
Sure.
If I am a receptionist, let's say, whose job is to greet folks who are coming into buildings, that might be difficult to do completely remotely. There still may be some option to have some flexibility there. So it's really those jobs that require on-site, like those examples.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Mrs. Scott.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. I just have a few questions for Dr. Mutillo. Are there, when we think about central office, those of us who've been in there's a large workspace, there's a large area with a lot of cubicles. How have those areas and those employees who work in those sort of densely populated workspaces, how are they being accommodated throughout this?
Great question. So, like school employees have been given the opportunity to telework, central services employees have been given that same opportunity. We also have central services employees who are coming in, and we're continuing to sort of work a phased-in plan for them. But we know, I'm sitting in my office here looking out, at rows of cubicles, and we know that we have to maintain social distancing and health guidelines. So we're working on additional guidance to provide to supervisors, because that's all very contextual based on the space. One central services space doesn't look like the next. So we're trying to provide some options for supervisors at this time. But I think what a lot of people are doing now, myself included, is when employees let me know that they're going to come in, I just ensure that I know who's at the site at that particular time, and I'm making sure that we don't have groups of employees all sitting together in the same area.
Okay, I appreciate that. I was just thinking there are, the area superintendent, and where your office is as well. That's a concern with trying to have people come back in, because there are, maybe up to 100 in some of those areas. So I appreciate that they're still allowed the opportunity to telework. But I didn't know if there were any changes to the buildings, like physical changes that could be addressed, or if that's not even a possibility.
At this time, we don't have a lot of physical changes. I think it is something that we're exploring, as we're also exploring additional changes to school sites.
Okay, I appreciate that. I haven't picked up on this, so I apologize if this has been asked and answered before. But how are our teaching assistants impacted?
Yeah, another great question. We haven't talked a lot about them publicly, because they still have a very critical job to do that can also be done remotely in a lot of ways. Just as a teacher is online with students, instructing students, supporting students, there's also a great need for IAs to do the same. So most of their jobs, they'll look different, but still are just as vital and still can be performed, just in a slightly different way now that it's remote.
And there haven't been any cuts to instructional assistants?
No, ma'am.
That's great. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Those were my questions. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mrs. Scott. Mrs. Kushner.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. I questions for both Dr. Mutillo and Ms. Gaddis. It's not Dr. Mutillo's there. I'll start with him. We traditionally have a lot of openings in special education. Is that just disproportionately? Is that still a shortage area as has been in the past?
Yes, I think it's still pretty comparable to percentages of what we've had in the past. So we're still working with those schools to try to fill those openings the best we can.
Thank you. And I mentioned it at another work session, but I do hope that you're pushing out the employee assistance programs that we have, just to have our employees focus on their self-care and wellness so that we can get through this stressful time. So just wanted to add that. But Ms. Gaddis, going back to technology, and thank you for giving a shout out to Activate Good, and for any of the public, and I'll say this again, Chair Sutton, in our main meeting, but if folks want to sign up, they can go to activategood.org and look for the phase 2 distribution volunteer slots. There's still plenty of slots opening for folks who want to give a day or a few hours just to help Activate Good and help Ms. Gaddis get these devices out to our students. So I encourage the public to do that. So we've got 125,000 families that did, or students that did reply to your survey. They do not all need devices, correct?
Correct. They do not all need. Right now, we're at about a 28% of those needing devices at this point in time.
And we're ordering 46,000 additional Chromebooks, but some students already have their devices in addition to the 46,000 need them for the 2021 school year, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
And
ma'am.
then additional folks who still have their devices from the spring.
Right, and they would have replied that they still have their device. We allowed the students to keep the devices over the summer. One, we knew we had summer learning, and two, we still didn't know what was going to happen in the fall at the time, and the idea of having to go through a full distribution for those students again just seemed a little unfair, and so we did allow them to keep them over the summer at that time. But there's an additional 46,000 that we're planning on giving out, and those come from the 50,000 we purchased in the spring. So the 50,000 we purchased in the spring, that is what we're using to give out now.
I gotcha. Okay, so we're not adding an additional 46,000. Okay, got it. And then we also do need to restore those schools where as you mentioned, we gathered up devices during the closure. So we need to make sure that the schools and the PTAs that raised funds for those devices have those devices in their schools restored, I suppose is the word we need to use, I guess.
Part of our discussion is that, and we've talked with the principals and they've been so gracious throughout this whole process. But our goal and part of what's on the consent agenda later on today is the purchase of additional devices, which the goal will be over the next year to provide a device per student. And that's the way we're going to be replacing devices in schools. So schools that gave us devices will get those devices back, plus additional devices for other students in their building. And so that's the way that's going to work at this time.
Thank you, because I think Chair Sutton's talked about us going to be a one-to-one device district. This is really accelerated. We were planning on doing that and stretching it out a bit over time, but as Chair Sutton said, this has accelerated our move to be, have devices for all our students. So I appreciate the acceleration of that work and the magnitude of that lift. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Ms. Kushner, I'll add, we had all three of my children, their teachers asked how we were on devices, if we needed anything, and were ready to point us at the distribution sites as they had their introductions. And I know a lot of our teachers are doing that. So.
Yeah. Great. And all of you are invited. You were all invited to come participate and hang out with us. I'm at Leesville all day, every day usually, and I have staff at all of the sites. So you're more than welcome to come and join all of us in the fun.
I've signed up for Thursday. I'll bring my mask. So thank you.
Ms. Gaddis, let me just jump in here right quick because I'm not clear. If the families have sufficient devices in the home to cover the needs of their student, I think many may have opted out of either participating in a survey. One, do you still want them to participate in the survey? And then secondly, many probably have chosen not to get a device to ensure that students or families who perhaps may have needed them more, allow those families to get a device. But because we're trying to move to being a one-to-one district, do we want all students to have a WCPSS issued laptop or help me sort of
Sure.
understand.
So we want every student to have what they need to be successful in learning. Right now, if that's working with what families have at home, then we're great. We want to be able to ensure that going forward, right? as we continue to go through. And like I said, in the spring, there may have been 1 or 2 devices. I talked to a fantastic mother yesterday while over at Leesville, and they have a blended family now, and they had 2 devices, but they've got 5 kids. And so having everybody try to share it and have real learning happening was becoming more and more difficult. And so she was picking up devices for those other families. So we turned off the survey already, but what we've done now is we've turned this over to the schools. So in effect, at this time of year anyway, our teachers are reaching out to all of our students. And what we're saying is our schools have a list of who has requested and who's responded. And we've asked principals and other staff at the school to look at the list and see who didn't respond. And then when they're reaching out to the families at this point in time saying, hey, by the way, do you need a device? Do you need a hotspot? And then they're updating our data, which is why those numbers are continuing to grow, because the family may not have completed the survey. And to be clear, to your point, they may have not completed it because they're already great. They don't have to worry about it. But we're accounting for every student at this time just to make sure we're meeting the needs of all of our students.
Okay.
Did that help?
That helps.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tricia, did that take care of your question as well?
Yes, thank you, sir. Because I'm sure that, as you assume, Ms. Gaddis, some of those students who didn't reply may have tech, but some just may not have gotten around, may not have the tech to respond to the survey. So I appreciate that y'all are following up in other ways. Thank you.
Yes.
And that's it. Thank you, Chair Sutton.
Thank you. Mrs. Cash.
Yes, thank you, Chair Sutton. I have a couple questions, maybe. Ms. Gaddis.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just thank you to Ms. Kushner about mentioning Activate Good. They've been really great. I just emailed Amber Smith about how great that you gave her a shout out just now. And I appreciate that because I think they've been really helpful. My question is, so I'm amazed at what you've gotten out. I'm just amazed. Okay, thank you very much, Marlo Gaddis, at your team and what you have done.
It's the team, not Marlo Gaddis, I promise.
And so when the schools have gotten their surveys in and who has responded, and then like if they have, so what happens now? I know they send out something to their parents as the opportunity for them to get their device happens. How is that working per school? Like if a school has 500 people that have asked for a device, but maybe how are they letting those people know when to get their devices?
So schools don't. Schools are not managing this process. They're just getting in the need, and then our team is managing the process. So right now it's a group effort between communications. Mr. Simmons and my team have been working hand in hand. I could not do without them either. I know I didn't mention them earlier, but major kudos to them. But we're working through, and so what we're doing is we're getting large groups, and then we're sending out messages via school messenger, through email and through phone text. They get a message from us saying, hey, this date is your day. And then you can come on this date or any date after going forward. So, if they got a date to pick it up today, and today didn't work for mom and dad because they were working, we're offering extended hours on Wednesdays and Thursdays from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then we're also offering Saturdays from 9 to 1. So we're trying to make a lot of different things happen all at once. As a working parent myself, I get frustrated when my child's school doesn't offer things that I can attend or do myself. And to be clear, that's not a Wake County school. So certainly not unhappy with any Wake County school in that aspect. But we're trying to meet the needs of families as much as possible going forward.
So you actually probably have the devices, you're just trying to get the scheduled pickup times.
Well, we can't invite, we can't have 44,000 people descend upon 5 locations at the same time. And we've worked really carefully with Kelly Creech and Health Services, trying to figure out how much is enough and how much is too many. And so we're still working with those numbers. So folks have asked us for a schedule. There's not a set schedule right now because we're adjusting. We adjusted today to be able to invite more this week. And so because we haven't had as many show up as we expected. And so we're going to continue to adjust and move forward because we just don't want to create a crowding situation and a situation that's unsafe for our families, our volunteers, and our staff.
Great. Okay, so first of all, thank you. That's amazing. That's a lot of devices, and I cannot even imagine. I appreciate you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Dr. Matillo, I had a quick question. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I can't even imagine the amount of information that you are dealing with from staff and principals and how you're putting everybody together in the spots they need. So thank you for that. I just, again, just want to emphasize here, and I don't know if this is a good spot, but I do really feel like after talking to some of the kindergarten parents and I know FAST is starting more next week. I think the Ys are gonna be open next week as far as how they're gonna do for working parents. I am so hoping that the school system puts K2 back into the classroom as soon as possible. I'm hoping that we're working with our principals in elementary ed to see how much of our staff is willing to come back to take care of our kindergartners through 2nd grade. There's a real difficulty as far as our kindergartners trying to be online if they don't have an adult with them. So I hope that we can get enough staff into our schools that are willing to work with our kindergarten through 2nd grade students. And so I don't really have that's just what I'm hoping, that's my wish. But I'm also want to thank you, Dr. Matillo. I mean, you've done a great job of trying to take care of so many parents' needs and teachers' needs at the same time. So that's just a comment. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And we've all heard your feedback about K2 who are on this call as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Cash. And your wish is heard, duly noted, and I'm sure that staff is taking note of that as it is, I think the desire of us all to see students back as soon as possible, but with particular regard to our youngest students. So thank you for that. Mr. Haggerty.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sutton. Just 2 quick questions. First of all, Dr. Matillo, I got to say 99% of positions filled. That's really impressive. I think that's really good news. I wanted to ask you, of the remaining vacancies that are unfilled, do you see any particular holes or clusters, by grade level, school type, special ed, anything like that that should impact our policy making, our decision making?
Well, I do think, yeah, great question, Mr. Haggerty. As Ms. Kushner asked about, special ed always seems to be a challenge for us. So that is one area that to note. We looked at, different grade levels, different schools, and everything else seems to be more across the board. So always continued attention on special education teachers is a good thing.
Okay, great. And I know that right now is not the time, but if there's a strategy or anything that you would recommend that can help us to address that in the future, please bring it to us in a future meeting. The second thing is, and this might be a question for you, this might be a question for Ms. Gaddis, where we've been granting the accommodations for staff in order to be able to teach from home. Do we know that they all have sufficient technology such that they're not having glitches or bandwidth issues in any of those situations?
Yeah, I can answer it at a high level, and Marlo may add some additional information, but I know, last year over the summer, we had great efforts to get devices in the hands of teachers as well. Many of them had older devices that were not always conducive, always reliable, but they now have brand new devices that are functioning great. And I've just heard from teachers how excited they were to get these new devices. So I think we are in pretty good shape, but Marlo certainly add on to that as needed.
Sure, I do think it has been a great partnership with Dr. Matillo and his staff, pairing orientation with the staff device rollouts for our new teachers. In the past, our schools were required to figure out how to fund the devices for their teachers, and we've taken that on in tech services. So that gives us a little more flexibility to do some of that. So as far as a device, I know we have a few still new teachers that just came on board, just started this week, that may not have their devices yet, but there were pickups all day. I think there was a bunch today, tomorrow, and Thursday. But our teams are working together to make sure they get the invitations for those. And then as far as connectivity and bandwidth, that is dependent upon the home of the family, but all of our teachers, if they're comfortable, are welcome to come into the school building if they're having some of those issues as well. And then if they're having any additional issues, they can speak with their principal, and we have a couple other options if needed at that time.
Great, thank you both. Thank you both.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Hegarty. Ms. Johnson-Hostler.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton, and certainly thank you, Marlo and Tim. You both have been very responsive to me in the last 24 hours as families were trying to get connected yesterday. So thank you both for being great at responding and very quickly. I do have one follow-up question, Marlo. Well, actually, let me also thank Mark Savage. I appreciated following him on Twitter yesterday. He reminded me that for our students who, so I'm going to say publicly just in case people didn't see it, that he reminded, sorry, if they don't actually have their devices yet, that they can actually get in contact with their teachers to actually do the call-in option. So I thought that was a great option because I didn't think of that on Sunday when I had a meeting with a group of families to talk about this. So just for the rest of our board members, if you didn't see Mark's tweet, I think that's a great thing for any families who are reaching out to you with technology issues, is to using the call-in option for now. My question was, which I've talked to Tim, Mr. Simmons about this quite a bit as well, about the click rate of opening the survey. So I think I know the answer because I asked you about reopening the survey, but I guess I'm curious. So I met with a group of families and created flyers that I showed Mr. Simmons, and hopefully he's okay with them. But he was sharing with me that the click rate is low for some of our families, so that may be why several of them did not know the technology survey existed, because that's what I found out Sunday when I had a meeting with a group of families. So just so you know, Ms. Gaddis, I distributed a couple hundred flyers to our students who are in our hotels. And then one of the food distribution site is also distributing a couple hundred for me today for families who are picking up any food from the distribution sites today. And so I'm curious if you still want me to continue to send, at this point, I think I heard from about 20 plus parents because I put my cell phone number on there. Do you still want me to send them all to their media coordinators, or do you want to chat offline about a better coordinated effort, since now I've been doing the outreach to our home insecure families?
Sure. We can discuss some other ways if that's helpful as you're going through. We do, one of the things that we've always stressed is the teacher relationship. And so we knew that we weren't going to get everybody on the front end of that. So right now it's about that personal connection as we're opening up the school year and trying to get that. They certainly can call their schools. The schools have the ability. Our help desk also has the ability to enter a survey if they so need to.
Okay.
Yeah, that changed yesterday. We had so many parents yesterday call the help desk to get their needs, and our help desk at the time did not have access, so we've granted that access, and now they can call that as well. Should they need that as well. But we've also worked, Paul Coe has worked with several of the food distribution sites as well that were gathering that information. And he's turned that over to the principals to make sure those students have devices accounted for in the survey as well. So we are working every angle that we can to make sure every student has what they need. And so we will not turn down any type of way to connect with our students in order to make sure they have what they need.
Okay, thank you. So I think I appreciate the update for the help desk. I initially gave the feedback for their school, but I will add this to my list. And thank you again for your quick response and trying to get those answered quickly on yesterday.
Anytime.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Hosler. And Ms. Gaddis, one last question. If a student has or in the future damages a device, I know you've got a tech support for help in terms of getting online and that sort of thing. But if they have a damaged device, was there information on there about that? Or could you speak to that? If so, I missed that.
No, you're fine. So when our families come in to pick up their devices, part of the loan agreement is just that they will let us know if it's damaged, lost, or stolen. And we ask them to let us know that within 48 hours. All they have to do is submit a help desk ticket to let us know. And then we can work with them to either fix or replace the device. We certainly don't want students without. I do set a reminder to all students and to all families to please be gentle with our devices, even though they're military tested and have great protection on them. It would be greatly appreciated. We've already had several returned through the spring distribution. Actually, we had quite a few returned through spring distribution, and we swapped those out as well. So just be kind to your device, but we will help you through that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And thank you again, Ms. Gaddis and Dr. Matillo for that detailed information and update. Greatly appreciated. I do want to make one comment to the board before moving on to our next topic, and that is similar to staff and the phase-in plans for returning to work. The board will begin phase-in plans for returning to work or continuing work, but returning to our meetings as well. Right now, we've got those plans tentatively slated to begin on September the 15th with our second meeting in September. Similar to staff, we will be returning in small groups on a rotating schedule so that we can also observe social distancing guidelines and can follow those guidelines. And we will be having some opportunity for just a place on next meeting's agenda for our first meeting in September to have some public discussion around what our phase-in plans will look like. And so between now and during that time, board members, if you have any thoughts or needs for accommodations of any kind, please let me or Superintendent Moore know so that we can begin planning for those accommodations and requests as we move into our phase-in plans for September as well. So again, we'll have some time on our agenda at our next meeting during the work session to talk a little bit about what our phase-in plans will look like as well. So with that, we'll move on to our last topic on the work session agenda. That is Board Policy 4400 with regard to attendance. And so that is being brought to us by Assistant Superintendent Paul Coe. Mr. Coe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. Good afternoon, Superintendent Moore, Chair Sutton, and board members. We are bringing to you our attendance policy, Policy 4400, to you today to address the recent guidance from the Department of Public Instruction in defining attendance in our remote learning environment. So before we begin our review of this policy, please note that Policy 4400 is on our slate of policies to bring to the policy committee to consider other aspects for revisions, including but not limited to college visitation. So we will be bringing the attendance policy again back to policy committee for these reasons. apart from the current discussion of defining attendance in the remote learning environment. So with these parameters, I'll review the latest revisions to our policy 4400. And starting with the preamble, all we've added is language that notes attendance must be taken each day of the school year for on-site and remote instruction days. So I just wanted to see if there's any questions about the preamble revisions.
Don't see any hands at this point, Mr. Coe.
Great. So then I'll continue. And so we've added section A that includes both section 1 on-site instructional days that added language during on-site instruction days. We also added section 2 remote instruction days, and we added the language that starts with to be counted present during remote instruction days. And the things to point out here is that it says either of the following 2 statements must be true. And this is in alignment with the Department of Public Instruction guidance, is that one is student completes their daily assignments either online or offline, and or a student is present in synchronous live real-time instruction. The second is student has a daily check-in or two-way communication such as a phone call with the appropriate teachers as follows. And the two-way communication could also be via email as well. And in grades pre-K through 5, it's with the homeroom teacher, and in all other grade levels, each course teacher as listed on the student's schedule. And we've also added that final paragraph in this section that says a student's failure to log into a particular online program or lesson on a given remote instruction day shall not be grounds to mark the student absent for the day, so long as the student meets one of the other attendance requirements described above. And the teacher can subsequently change the student's attendance status from absent to present based on evidence of engagement. So any questions on section A?
Yeah, I see a couple here. Ms. Kushner.
Thank you, Chair Sutton and Mr. Coe. And I think it's important to clarify, this is a policy on attendance, not grading or completion of assignments. So even though we're giving an either or about attending synchronous or completing assignments, students have to do their assignments and will be graded, but that's a separate policy. This policy is just looking at attendance. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. It is simply to clarify what counts as present in our current context, where students may be eventually in on-site instruction and in our current context of being in remote instruction.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Ms. Kushner. Mr. Haggerty.
Thank you, Dr. Coe. So I want to be clear, is this language about remote instruction day attendance? I mean, is this something that's been required of us by DPI and the state board?
It's been guidance that was I think it was sent to us recently, and I think I might ask Jonathan about the requirement piece.
Yeah, I mean, this is DPI's like their declaration regarding whether you should or should not treat a student in attendance in remote instruction. So I do believe that districts across the state are hustling to try to incorporate this in practice and policy. And largely what you see here in policy tracks, I mean, almost by word, the DPI guidance.
So to clarify, that's guidance we've gotten from the state, with the anticipation that, if we, the problems we would have if we didn't change the policy, but is there leeway in the specific wording, or has it been handed to us that, here on these tablets is the language you must use? What kind of discretion do we have on the policy language?
I'm looking at it as we speak. The title to the DPI document is called NC DPI Reopening Schools Guidance Focused Remote Instruction Plans, and they talk about it as their final. It's entitled sort of final guidance on the topic. And to me, I mean, I do believe that this is something that the district really does need to comply with.
Okay. So
Go ahead.
I say, well, here's my concern. I think I understand the intent of it with the second part of this, allowing a daily check-in or communication to count towards attendance. But the way that it's drafted, it's led some teachers to contact us, basically wondering if this just gives all students an opt-out for attendance, that they can just call in, say they were there, and there's no, no enforcement, no way to manage it. And so, again, I don't have an alternative. This is just a concern that's been raised. I know that as you adopt rules and procedures, you might be able to tweak it and refine it a little more. But, if either of the two statements can be true, then, the two-way communication or the daily check-in has just, created some concern among teachers that there could be floods of students calling just to, declare themselves present, absent more. I understand the intent of it, but that was the worry. That's all.
Let me speak to that just for a second, if I could, because I certainly understand that sentiment, and that there's nothing to keep, in my opinion, that if the board wants to, and I know this is here on short notice with the school year starting, to add additional language that would make any clarifications that the board wanted. So I understand that. And if the evidence ultimately turned out that the only thing that the student did was to have a phone call or to have one email, and that would count as being present for the full day, then I certainly understand that concern. I think that there would be some leeway there for clarification if that's what the board wanted.
Okay. And Mr. Haggerty,
Yes, sir.
something I wanted to add, that I think the intention of this policy is to clarify how a student can be marked present, but that's not to say that the standards for what we want our students to learn, both in rigor and the mastery of standards and the expectations that individual schools will have of our students, we're not saying like go loose on that, right? I know it could potentially be read that way, so maybe we could tighten up some language, but just know the intention is to just make sure that, I think, given this remote instruction piece and knowing how fluid our context has been, I think it's to make sure that we have every opportunity to say a student has engaged with us, and then we're going to continue to try. But the work doesn't stop at like the student is here and gave me a text or an email or a call, and then that's all that school is. That's not what this policy is trying to say.
Great. And I understand the intent behind it. And so I think if you can, I'm not even asking for a change in the policy as much as we can tighten that up in the rules and procedures or whatever internal communications go out about that. That'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Haggerty. Dr. Martin.
Thank you. My questions are along a similar line to Mr. Haggerty's. When I look at the policy, I rate it through two lenses, one of the parent-student and one through the teacher. From the parent-student perspective, I have heard from parents who basically say, how do I engage, particularly for younger children, if, I'm working during the day, the time I have to work with my child is in the evening, how do we engage? So I think that's the unusual. I think this policy creates an opportunity for that. So I think from my read, it sort of checks off that concern, from a parent. So I think that flexibility is there. But the flip side is what Mr. Haggerty raised, from the teacher side. So one issue is the specific issue that Chris raised, about it being sort of an opt-out, a way to disengage. And to that, I wonder if we might not want to have some kind of language, and it could be an RNP instead of policy, but it might be appropriate for policy that, if engagement must consistently be outside whatever normal is, right? Each class is going to have its guidance for what is the normal primary engagement. So that potentially, if the engagement needs to be outside of normal class time, that the student would, let the teacher know, make arrangements ahead of time so that you sort of know what's going on. I see some value in something like that to keep a little bit of that responsibility. It's not, as Ms. Kushner noted, this is not about doing assignments. Those are required. But from a teaching perspective, if I don't know who's showing up, it's really hard to make sure that I've got, engagement. If I want to have small groups working on a project and I don't know whether somebody's going to show up or not going to show up, that becomes incredibly difficult. So it just strikes me that there could be some wisdom to at least have some guidance that if there are accommodations that are necessary, then let's just arrange for that up front rather than letting it be sort of hit or miss on any given day. Related to that, I want to respect teachers' time, because if we're opening up the opportunity for the contact outside of normal school hours, then what is the expectation that we're placing on teachers? Teachers are on call 24/7 anyway, but is this sort of formalizing that or having some level of expectation? So I guess that's a two-part question. Is one, what are we saying in this policy about the time we're expecting teachers to work? And I guess second is, can we create some scenario that says, if you've got special circumstances, we're glad to work with that, but let us know ahead of time instead of reacting in an arbitrary fashion?
So, Dr. Martin, I think those are good questions. I think the intent of the policy is not to create maybe a wider window of work hours for teachers. I think it's more in terms of the communication. I think it's in case something comes up and the student may not be able to engage in that synchronous time. There's a communication that happens where the student can connect with the teacher, hopefully at a different time, to be able to get caught up in the learning. Because it's like we have students that may be older in high school taking care of younger siblings and making sure that their younger siblings are able to learn during their session. So I think it's, I read that as like potential flexibility there, but I think your suggestion on tightening can we clarify further in RMP procedures? I think we definitely can, and that's something we can look into.
I mean, I'm in a complete agreement with Mr. Haggerty that the intent, fully behind the intent, it is just, the rollout. How does this look like, particularly from a teacher's perspective?
Dr. Martin, if I could intercede here, I think maybe what we're looking for in the RMP, as I'm listening to the conversation, is how we may define absences, right?
Yes.
Because what this attendance policy change is doing is it's defining how to count presence, but it's not expanding how we may look at absences and what the process will be for that. So I think that would be a good thing to put in the RMP, perhaps, or the guidance on how to implement the policy, is what happens now with absences. It could be the student didn't contact the teacher at all, but there may be also, because the practice you're talking about in terms of when we know there is a barrier ahead of time is contemplated in how excused absences can happen before the absence actually occurs. And so it allows for coordination for missed work. And something along those lines is kind of what's floating around in my head.
No, and we're in agreement here. I think it's twofold. It's one, it's a little bit like the discipline issue, right? The absence feels a little bit like, how do we punish the problem? And I guess I'm looking at it a little bit more from a teacher planning perspective, right? If I'm planning as active a classroom as I can in a remote setting, I kind of need to know who's going to be present. And if you can't make it, I kind of need to know that so that I can work that into my planning. So that's where, I think we really want to accommodate people's needs, but the more we can get that accommodation up front, then we can plan for it, as opposed to, oh, it happened, now we'll just deal with it, if that makes sense.
It does. And we're hoping that the more connected that our students and schools are with each other, that those things will be happening so that teachers and students communication is strong through relationship building during the start of the school year. So, but I think that's something that we can consider in the RMP as well as we go forward.
Thank you.
I think that'd be the most appropriate place for that, because I think we're sort of somewhat treading a fine line between attendance and, in the preamble, what is referred to as participation, and what Dr. Martin has referenced a couple of times around engagement. And they're very close, but even in the preamble, it sort of makes a distinct difference between the two. And this just kind of really focuses on attendance. I mean, even in the physical environment, a student can be present and kind of present in a class, but stare out of the window all day or sleep on the desk. They're still have to be counted as present or attended, but they're not in attendance. But a different metric when you're talking about their participation or engagement. At least feels like to me that we're sort of on that fine line, and this is just squarely on making sure that we count attendance and giving guidance around attendance. Ms. Mahaffey, we got time for one more question, and then we need to wrap up so that we can get to our meeting.
Yes. So I was just going to make the suggestion, Mr. Coe, that under number 2, part B, where it says student has a daily check-in or a two-way communication, I think the trip up is by exclusively listing, such as a phone call, whereas our students don't normally call their teachers. This format may change that, but if we could either say, or email or a school approved communication format, which would be, either Google Classroom or Canvas, that may help with some of the clarification on how students are about to go about reaching out to their instructors.
And the phone call language is not required. So, if the board wanted to have some flexibility on that and saying, limiting it simply to a school approved format of communication, and then the schools can have a role in determining what's an acceptable level and of two-way communication for purposes of the policy, that's fine. That's perfectly acceptable. There's nothing that dictates that you say phone calls good enough or the only one.
Well, if I'm home, it's either someone's calling the school and then the school has to call my phone at home, or someone's, my classroom phone is ringing throughout the lesson as I'm trying to. So I think that might have been some of the concerns.
So let me just clarify if I could, is the board, I know that we need to get to the meeting, is the board interested in saying, listing it more, of saying such as by phone call, email, or other approved format of communication as determined by the school, or do you just want to leave it communication in a manner acceptable by the school? You don't want the list, with the last line or not? I know that staff will want to try to be able to bring this back if the rest of the board's interested in this tonight with that language. So any thoughts, Ms. Mahaffey?
That was 6 of one, half a dozen of the other for me.
Okay.
I think, it's saying the same thing, whether it's the school determining what the communication is going to be or just listing it out. I think the first one, if I'm a parent reading it or a student reading it, it becomes a little bit more clear, because then I don't have to peel back a layer and go to the school and see what approved communication is.
Well, I personally agree with the issue you raised, Ms. Mahaffey, because this could imply to some people a right for a student to have the teacher's phone number. And I don't think we want to get into that situation where teachers feel like they are obliged to give out particularly a personal number to be contacted after hours. So I think removing phone call would make sense.
And adding in then in a manner determined to be acceptable by the school.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
I
right, so
just don't want to
Mr.
imply that somebody has the right to a teacher's personal phone number.
All right, Mr. Bloomberg, you got that, and we'll make that change?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Coe, didn't mean to cut you off. I see that most of the changes beyond this part
Yeah, they're
are
just,
and references. Is there anything else you needed to add to that? And I'm, again, just trying to move it forward.
no, sir, they're just technical changes of like section letters and policy references.
Okay. Okay. All right. I don't believe that there are any additional questions I don't see regarding this policy. So this is on our action agenda. We can continue the discussion there with regard to any other changes, and we'll see the changes made by Mr. Bloomberg updated and have further discussion when we get to this as an action item.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Coe. So with that, that concludes our work session agenda. Superintendent Moore, did you have anything else to add or want to close with regard to this or the reopening of schools, or we can move to the meeting?
So I didn't have anything to add to these agenda items. I just wanted to touch base with the board. We had sent to the board, staff had sent to the board in the past month an agenda that included some dates and some timelines and deliverables around the work with the SRO, focus groups in the community, the feedback, and looking at our MOU over a longer period of time with some stakeholder groups. We were planning to bring some of that work to the board today at the work session, but decided to, because we needed to bring the MOU and the presentation for the COVID Scientific Advisory Board, and because we had the attendance policy that was time sensitive, we stopped and decided to bring that SRO piece at the next work session. And in particular, what that is we want the board to have an opportunity to weigh in on all of the survey questions that are going to be going out. We believe it might be important for the board to review that prior to actually deploying a survey, rather to make sure that we're gathering the data that we all think we need to gather and that we want to see. So that will be prepared and ready for the next work session. We could have brought it this time around, but just felt like with Finance Committee also and all of that other stuff, we waited until the next one. And just wanted to make sure, because we've communicated publicly about this work, that those that are listening as well as the full board understand where we're headed.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. I don't want to rush that work and understand that there were a few items that were a bit more pressing with regard to the opening of school, but certainly not to minimize the importance of the SRO work as well. So we will certainly be getting to that in our next work session, and thank you for that update. So with that, we'll end our work session and move to our public meeting. And so we will adjourn this meeting and pick up in our public meeting. It is about 5:36, so we'll give everybody time to shift over, and we'll start at 5:45 with our public meeting at that time. Thank you very much, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.